Okay. Welcome everybody along to this community board meeting, Teviot Valley. Before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the passing of Flip Parker. He was a 4-2 member of this community board. I deputy for 2 terms. We're passionate supporter of the Teviot Valley. Basically, he really was sadly missed. So I'd just like everyone just to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge the apology of Krishna Action. And yeah, I should someone to move.
I'll move.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Second it?
Yeah.
Thanks, Norman. All in favour? Carry. Okay, well, the speakers here from Public Forum. We've got, I'll just like to point out that each speaker in Public Forum has 5 minutes to address the community board, and I will be holding everyone pretty close to that this time because we've got a fairly full agenda and we need to get through it all. So first up, I have Norman from the RSA. Yeah. Just have a seat up here.
Oh, I've never sit at the front table, am I? Sure. Yeah. Okay. As you know, I'm here today on behalf of the Rockstar State RSA. I'm here on a matter of principle. I'm not here about the money. I'm about the respect and honour of the citizens of this valley, the Teviot Valley, past and present. We built this complex to honour those that never returned and for the use of those that did. Now, I'm going to ask you to continue to honour this respect. This complex was provided by the community for the RSA and the borough to share, because they used to share the same building at the back of the town hall in the years up to when they moved into here. Now, the RSA room was built as a sanctuary and a refuge to those that needed it. I don't know how many of you here have lived with a returned soldier or soldier lady, and know what has happened and how those people need a sanctuary to come to. Where you are sitting here now, most of you won't know this was the games room till the RSA was squeezed out and poked into what was a wee public room that we've got there now. Now, most of you probably don't realise at this stage the RSA is as relevant now as it was in the 50s and 60s and even 70s. Do you know there are more returned service people in New Zealand now than after the end of the Second World War? And that is due to the fact that there's been so many conflicts. Sorry, I had it there. I've got 2 pages written there of so many conflicts that New Zealanders have served in. Some of it's peacekeeping, but most of it there are bullets flying around, etc. So, stop the clock. Yeah. Okay, and actually just here we're just been going through the minutes, and the members were most unhappy about being squeezed out of here into the wee room with the formation of CODC. We wouldn't be here if the Rockstar Borough Council was still going. And we also have discovered there is a document given to the RSA from the Rockstar Borough Council. Now that document has been deposited in the Bank of New Zealand. Now the Bank of New Zealand does not hold these documents anymore, so we are now on the trail to find that. That was in 1974. I'm sorry, I'm not an actual public speaker. I've got to have a few notes, and I'm not paid to sit down and write this out. I've had to do this in my bit of spare time I can find. Now, and I talked about the relevance. We had three that went to school here with my children, and have served overseas in quite a serious conflict and have come back. One is an active member who works in the welfare, or what we used to call welfare, is now advisor, what we call advisory role. If you've served overseas, you've got a bung leg, you need to know where to go to get funding to get this, etc. done. So we've got one person that does that. We have one that is unsure of joining the RSA or doesn't feel he's ready for it yet. And unfortunately, we've had a family that had to move away because they couldn't reintegrate into society, and being a small town, they felt it was better to go to a big town. And that's before we could get some services and get some background on this person. So if you think the RSA is a diminishing organisation, it has actually got the potential to grow far bigger than what it was. So I've outlined a wee few things there, and you'll see in the correspondence I've been having about with the paid staff that we're pretty gutted, actually disgusted, I said, at them not understanding or respecting. There's been no respect shown here for the organisation and the way that Valley has built this complex over the years. So, yeah, I think. So I just ask you guys to have a good look, and send that report back and ask for our original lease with a minor change in it to make sure it gets reviewed every 10 years or rolled over every 10 years. As I said, it's not about the money, but it is the fact that we haven't been honoured, or the past members that have served overseas and the present members that haven't been honoured in the way this valley wants to honour them. So yeah, so I'll leave it up to you. You can fight it out with those that are paid to send stuff down to you. But we would respect this community board to stand up and for the rights of those in the community here. So thank you.
Thanks, Norm.
Yeah.
Anyone got any questions?
Oh, yeah, any questions? Yeah.
Before we go, like one question I have, and you've answered it pretty much, is when I first looked at your information, is the relationship between the RSA and this memorial wall.
Yeah,
obviously it was instrumental in getting it built. Is it?
Yeah, the community is just all rallied together. When we look back, it was probably 100, 150 men went away. Fair majority of them came back on that side of it. And when this was built, there was a mayor that probably didn't have an office. There was a town clerk and a secretary. It didn't take how many people we got here to run it. So they were a very minor part, and the library was shifted in here, but the rest of it is all, what is anybody in the district here knows this is the memorial hall, war memorial hall. So, yeah. And any signatures are all on it. So yeah. And the RSA proudly flies all the flags in this town and on this flag. Yeah, and pays for them.
What's in the bank? What's been held in the bank?
A document from the Rockstar Borough Council. But whoever took the minutes never wrote down what the document was about. But we thought if someone's going to put something in a bank deposit box, there must be something signifying. Otherwise, yeah, there's very little. The formation of it, we thought we'd find some minutes where they're toing and froing and discussing things with. But I'm just presuming the way that communities have used to operate before we got corporatised was we all got stuck in and done something. And the legal paperwork was probably not an issue because we all knew what we were doing. So yeah,
Thanks, Norm.
that's about all. Yeah, the other thing is we've got 35 members at the moment, and like I say, that's the CMT. We've got people in the valley that have been at the Vietnam War, been around lots of other conflicts. So yeah.
Thanks, Norm. It's very good, interesting information for what we're going to look at later. Okay, Richie. Talk to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Richard McNeish. I live up in Aldridge. So I'm here representing the Rockstar Golf Club along with Mr. Greenfield. We'll speak about the caravans using that area down there. And the matters that I wish to address are the rent, which is proposed, and no man's land, which is turned up. We've been most gratified for the remission of lease rent in the past, as it has enabled us to control weeds and enhance the golf course, making the green area a real asset to Teviot Valley. We pay $1,995 in rates, plus water rates, and we'd be one of the bigger users in the valley. And it is not affordable to pay extra rent of $772 for the next 5 years on top of what we already pay. This levy is a double dip, as we are already paying rates. We see no reason for it, as it appears we have been singled out. I hear no mention of it from other local clubs. I am endeavouring to show the cost of work of looking after this land area. Duxton, for example, is a 9-hole golf course, a fifth of the size, and it has 300 members. We have 65. There's just no comparison between areas. We've got quite a large land area to look after. My last lot of figures, you know, I find that I'm continually finding more voluntary. People don't tell you how much voluntary work they do. They just do it and then disappear, and then I don't know. I'll find out later, and I think just came to my attention that one member who changes the pins on the course, for example, would spend 200 hours a year doing that work, and that's not included in the calculations, which I sort of get to about 1,800 hours, but I'm still well under the number of hours. And I estimate that it takes 1,000 hours, and this is not including the women's club administration, to administer the golf club. Voluntary works. Christina made the comment that our yearly balance sheet showed a credit of 7,000 and that we were in a strong financial position. If voluntary work had to be paid for, this would not be the case. I've got a number of voluntary hours down there, but I'm not going to go through that because time to the essence. And I don't see that will achieve what I can sort of say that in the end our hours would be over that 1,800 hours. We've always had a rabbit problem, which was not there in the past. Got machinery and water pipe repairs and replacement costs. We need to be financial to deal with these. There has to be an incentive for voluntary work to continue, as without it we would not survive. The membership of the club has declined to 65, although it does vary from time to time. We do have some junior members now, which probably adds 10 onto that. And the age of our older members is, well, our incoming chairman is going to be 80 this year. You get some idea of the situation that they're facing. We believe that we are not only maintaining the course for our members, but also maintaining and beautifying this important green area for the whole of the community. We provide 2 outside toilets at a cost to us, and they are used by the general public, school children who walk through the course to sport practices and school events, which in some cases are held on the course. We also offer tuition for school children at no cost to learn how to play golf. The course is used by the general public to walk and run dogs, and for individuals walking and running. Where else would you find a mowing area for these activities? Rabbit control. This was not a problem in the past years. It was controlled by rabbit boards and regional council, but now it's out of control. We have put up rabbit netting fence from the cattle fence from the bowling green to Don Hamilton's house along that riverside boundary to continue to keep the rabbits out. There is a problem with the rough behind the AMP Pavilion being a breeding ground for rabbits, which then cause destruction burrowing from the playing areas. Rabbit control methods used each year are fin bone guessing, night shooting, rabbit inspection. Cats and dogs also play a part. This has mainly been done on a voluntary basis. You may have noticed no rabbits in the children's playground, and this is from the work that we have done that this has happened. The contract cost of this work would be between 9 and 12,000. Depends upon the infestation as to what the cost would be if it was contracted. There's always going to be a rabbit problem. There's no controls happening around us. The gun laws and the local police we're meant to be doing a good job, but it takes 2 hours before we start our operation to get a hold of the police, and then we have to let them know when we're finished. And these operations take a number of about 7 people and back to operate. Weeds. The main problem is broom, also blackberry on
Can I just interrupt you just a second? We have got all that, what you're reading out in front of us.
Right.
Could you just summarise what you've got left there and talk about the no man's land piece, just briefly?
I'll give it to you, Mr. Chairman. So there's continual spraying of the weeds every year, and the old adage of 1 year's seeding equals 7 years weeding, and that's the problem that we face. And we've also sprayed behind the rugby pavilion. I've sort of sprayed all that area that goes right down to the golf course to try and make this rabbit problem less than what it is at the present time. And I think, all the work we've done over the years, you know, to drive into Rockstar and you're not met with a yellow haze, which you used to be met with. And I think this should be recognised, that the community board should recognise this for the truck. And that's why I was sort of asking about permission of this release. And generally, we are endeavouring to control all those areas and obviously keep them in good shape. Make, of course, a real picture. I think, the no man's land, Mr. Chairman, I should sort of say about that, but it's a golf club car park, which, as long as I've ever known, it's been a golf club car park. We maintained that. We've done some drainage work there, stopped the ponding of the water. We've mown and we sprayed around the edges and look out. It could do with a bit of a grade. Nice of the council to grade those tracks there instead of having all the potholes that are there. And we would ask that become part of the golf club lease, that particular area of land. And the conclusion which you have down there, I think it's quite important. This golf course is quite unique. It has rock outcrops, and only our town's about the only other course that I know that's like that. And people really come here to play on it, and the town gets the offshoot of all that accommodation and spending that happens in the town from those people who come. And I think that's quite important. It's a real broadcast like that, and lots of people can be proud of it. Have you got the schoolboy newsletter, from the school? Yeah. Right. So there has been a change there now. Willie Moore, who's a Commonwealth professional, has more money has gone in his direction, so he's wanted to spend that on the Commonwealth boys. So that's what sort of happened there. So we've got Mahal Pierce, who's coming at his own expense, he's Secretary of Target Golf, to on Sundays to take these boys, and he'll give them upskill their knowledge from where it is now, as he himself is a very good golfer. And I'd just finish off by saying, Mr. Chairman, that special thanks to Paul Hayes, who was a local company who's put his time and effort into bringing these boys through. And I'll look forward to one of them representing the Taylor one of these days. Yeah. And that's, I'll just thank you for your time and listening, and I hope I've covered what you're really doing.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Richie. Yeah, no, yeah, lots of knowledge, there's a lot of interest in golf at the moment from the younger school kids, so it's good to see. Anyone got any further questions for Richie at this point? No? Thanks very much.
Mr. Chairman and board members, I'll continue on what Richie has been saying. Concerning the New Zealand NCA members, the pot that we set up at the golf club, when I set it up, I was thinking of the benefit for the Teviot Valley as well as our golf club, and it's close to the town, which makes a big difference. The security and the extra revenue for the golf club when playing a round of golf was also one reason why I tried to set it up. Listed in our members' travel directory for New Zealand motorhomers, there are 80 golf clubs from the far north of New Zealand to Bluff who are pots. This provides security for their clubhouses and extra income with green fees. When I see motorhomes parked at the golf club, I ask them why they stopped in Rockstar. Most time the answers are easy access for groceries, fuel and a good dumping station. Also easy access to the bike trails and great to be able to hire bikes as well, thanks to our staff. NZNCA members do not cause any disruption to neighbours. Our rules clearly state that noise must be kept to minimum in evenings and all rubbish must be packed out on the bin. And no wastewater is emptied on grounds. There are penalties if they are caught. We are certainly not Freedom Campus. 5 years ago, I attended a meeting with an NZNCA board member and the then mayor of the Central Otago District Council in relationship of Alexandria being made a motorhome friendly town, which is under the same board as this, which was put into place. The income from the members into that council in Alexandria is huge. $250,000 to $300,000 a month in the busy season goes into the Alexandria Council. Surely the profit our golf club can be included by the same council. I know there are other parking areas such as the racecourse, Flinders Pond and on our property, but the closeness to the township means we get people into your town. Recently, our club set up a motorhome park in Ranfurly, just for an example, and the Ranfurly people are delighted with what the NZNCA members have boosted their town considerably. The number of motorhomes on our roads has increased because of COVID, so let us utilise that fact, keep our top open and make them welcome in Rockstar. Our members are very, very proud of our golf club, as Richie said, which is thanks to huge voluntary hours of work. I could not believe when I joined this club how much voluntary work goes into this, running it and keeping it the way it is. There has been a pleasing increase in green fees since the pot was opened, which the club really needs badly to run efficiency. Our clubhouse badly needs maintenance. The Rockstar Golf Club requests that the Central Otago District Council please consider the benefits the pot is having on the golf club and the Teviot Valley generally, and allow this pot to remain open. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Group. Anyone got any questions for Group? So, I've got one question. You charge $5 a night or something?
The fee for overnight parking is $5 per person.
So how do you manage?
That is put in through, but there's a covered up at the top, and it's all written in there in the book that they have, that they pay in there. Yes, and they pay their fees in there as well to play around the golf.
So how are we going to police the fact that it's on can be top NTA users as opposed to the Freedom Campers, as you call it?
Well, the Freedom Campers just
How do we stop that happening?
I don't think, I haven't seen, no, I did see one small van in there one day and I went straight in and said, excuse me, are you planning to be here overnight? He said, no, I've just called in to play some golf. I said, good, because you're not allowed to stay here. It's just a matter of keeping an eye on it, but that happens right throughout New Zealand and it's just one of those things.
Yeah, well, therein lies the problem.
Not really, because we haven't, I don't think we've really seen any of those small vans in there. Because this park is listed in our directory and the members have the directory and they know that it's a park. There was one little wild group in there once, but they were not motorhomes, nothing to do with us. They were Southland guys playing golf and were too drunk to even move, literally. So Harry and I cleaned up the mess they left behind, which was not good. But they were nothing to do with the motorhomes. You'll get that anyway. They're the New Zealand motorhome members are pretty reliable people. They're out there to enjoy coming into the country and especially playing courses like Rockstar. They absolutely love it. And that's certainly increased within the membership, within the members. So do give it deep consideration. It's another asset for Rockstar in my eyes. And I'd be very disappointed if it didn't continue.
Thanks, Prue.
That's right. Thank you for hearing me.
We'll talk about that later. Well, just everyone would have read the minutes of the last meeting and happy.
Yep.
Yep. It's the last meeting.
Yes,
Someone
me.
confirm those current activity.
Oh, well.
Norman, second.
Second.
Stephen, all those in favour?
All right.
Just remind the members here to declare an interest if they have an interest in declare on any of the things we're going to talk about today. Any interest to declare? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to the first report, and that's the Municipal Opportunity Service Association lease renewal for staff.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I start, I just want to acknowledge that obviously these two next reports are about implementing the policy around the community leasing and licensing policy. And I just wanted to acknowledge there's obviously some clubs who are quite happy to hear from me because this policy means that they actually pay less in rent, but there's obviously some clubs and societies that I'm having to approach and they're having to pay more. So I just first of all wanted to thank so much Norman and Richie for the conversations that we've been having through there. They've been very, really nice to deal with, and I totally appreciate the volunteer work that's gone into the golf club and the great work that the RSA have done. And the fact that they've given up their time today as well to come along and speak to you all. So the first one up is the Rockstar Municipal Opportunity and Services Association. And their lease came to an expiry on the 13th of August 2021. Through the report, you can see that the recommendation is, of course, to extend, to renew their lease agreement, but apply the policy. You'll see when I looked at the calculation that is required by the policy, that I looked at the utilities, and because this is quite a heavy council used building for the library and the service centre, I have recommended that we go for half that. And I've also put in there continuing on some of the special conditions that were in their original lease, which is should the Memorial Hall complex be ever removed or destroyed, that paragraph there and the next one down there, that actually came out of their first lease, was actually an agreement to be put through there as well. As you're aware, at your last meeting, we also workshopped again a review of the policy. So I also wanted to put in there that still needs to go to council. The main area through that workshop was more the description around the subscriptions and whether it should also be called, instead of that, be clarified and called income. I don't think that is going to make any difference to the RSA, but just in case anything changes through that review process, I have put in the resolution C as well, that if it was for any reason to the advantage of the RSA, that then we can relook at the review as well. So any questions?
I have, I'm just trying to put it into words. I'm trying to understand the relationship between council and the RSA when this building was first built. And the RSA were given rights of occupancy then, and what's changed over time.
So all I can go on is what's on found in the record, and obviously what the RSA has provided in your conversations as well. Obviously, there's the didn't know about the vault at BNZ. That would be quite interesting to see what's in there. But all you can go on at the end of the day is the agreements in place, and the agreement in place was the one that you've seen the extracts of within there, as to how the term of the lease and special conditions. And the fact that there was no lease charge. However, now we do have this policy. It doesn't exclude RSA from that. When I've had conversations with my colleagues, I've just made sure, is there any other RSAs in council buildings? Is this common? The only ward that does have an association with an RSA is the Cromwell Community Hall, Memorial Hall there. In their redevelopment, I've talked to their project manager there, and the idea is that the RSA will pay the user fee for that area. They'll have a user fee for using the building, but they're not going to have a permanent occupation within it.
So the building is a war memorial hall. Does there need to be a lease in place for the RSA? My question is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, sure. Yes, you do, because it's a council-owned building. It's not an RSA building, and you've got a exclusive occupation. So you do.
Yeah, I have a problem with that policy in this instance, in that it's trying to be a one size fits all. Trying to fit every group into this one policy. And this is one instance where I don't actually agree with it. I would be in favour of carrying along with the way it was worded in the previous lease, and that they have free access to that room in this memorial.
I totally agree. I'll just wait here to run our sessions because you listen to what Norman said, and that's generally the feeling this guy.
Yeah.
We all grew up in families that we didn't satisfy. So.
Absolutely, and it was a very, as I started out saying, it was a really tricky conversation to start off with. Like I have the utmost respect for the RSA. I also have utmost respect for a lot of pubs in this area and throughout the whole district. But this is the policy that the community boards have approved, that went to council, and actually I waited until you'd done the review as well in the workshop to see what came out of that. And what came out of that was that it was more the subscriptions. It wasn't who was included and who wasn't. Yeah. So I waited until.
Like it's a favourable policy for a lot of groups, and this is one that it has unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And the RSA, they do some fundraising and that sort of thing. It's just to run their days, really, to maintain their flow, to run Anzac Day. And the last few years I've attended every service, most of that and Oxford, and it's just getting more, to me it's more and more relevant now than it has been when I was a kid. And so I would do everything I could to support the RSA. And if it means we give them that room to get free,
yeah, I'd support that.
sweet.
There is that option there.
Yeah.
option 3 to the grant release.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, yes.
I just wanted to reinforce like Christina's position that there is utmost respect for the RSA and that's totally acknowledged through this work.
Yeah.
And it's just that we have a policy in place which is.
Yeah.
So that's why you have another option.
Yeah, I realise that that option's there. And, I would move we exercise that option.
So when you're thinking about that, I would have thought it would have been a better option for we should say, right, we're almost thinking about that. We have had one place. Don't see why there isn't another way to look at it. I'm certainly opposed to the RSA paying the lease, but if the community paid it, that's a different process. And maybe a little more consideration. I know you're reviewing the policy.
So it's actually Saskia's team under the policy, heading with Alex is heading the review.
Yeah.
So that sits primarily as a staff working on that has been Alex and Linda who's here today. I don't think there has been any sort of thought or consideration of that to this date, Linda. It's sort of just come up now. It is at the stage of due to go to the next council meeting that we might just have a little reflection or maybe a discussion with you, Louise, around the policy in light of today's conversation around RSA for items like this. And yeah,
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's supposed to provide consistency, but captures
Yeah.
everything you want.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear to be
Yeah.
respectful when there is respectful. That's, yeah.
And as long as, you know, it's consistent, so there needs to be thought through probably of higher fees as well. Would be my thought as well, especially if the Cromwell Memorial falls, so if that is incorporated in there.
So is that wouldn't mean?
So for example, when I check with my colleagues, is there any other occupation of the RSA in any of our other memorial halls, etc.? Nothing like we have here in Rockstar where there's a permanent room.
Yeah.
But certainly the RSA and Cromwell are being incorporated into the thought process around the Cromwell Memorial Hall. And that and when I asked for the what charges are they going to be based, it's going to be the higher of that.
So this is when they build up the new hall. It's still really different. It's a whole new facility.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, as long as you know you've got that
Yeah.
consistency, which is why you've all gone through that process in the policy.
I wondered rather than trying to develop something on the fly, like if you're taking on board your thoughts, depending when you get to as the board about not charging, but one of the options I guess would be to leave it to have a negotiation with the RSA, which gives us some time to actually think through impacts on policy and where you want to get to, rather than kind of rushing to a decision.
So you say that when this came to the table initially, that we probably never thought about the RSA.
I'm sure it's true, yeah.
That's a fact.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a fact. So, sorry, Christine.
Yeah. So it's been a challenge, but Norman's been really lovely to deal with, and I really
Can
appreciate
I
it.
just say something? We actually brought this attention to Christina. The release was running out, I was going through looking for other stuff, I didn't even know we had one. So I just like to make that explain on that side of things.
Yeah, okay.
And, yeah.
So I don't know whether I'd sort of favour tidying it up today, really, but I can see the issues with the policy. I don't know what I remember thinking. I would have been heading down option 3 route, which
I support that.
which is just to grant release to the RSA on different terms, so that's pretty broad, so we can change that. I favour that.
Yeah, I can live with that because the reality is that we're paying for it anyway.
Yeah.
The cost of having that facility has been covered by the builder.
For the building themselves.
That's it.
For what term? So just to cover off that.
Well, it's terms, it's been every 10 years, is that correct?
30. So what we could do is say in B that we've got there, you can say for $1 that needs to be, you know, some consideration, obviously we don't charge more. And then you have to put no rent reviews, and I suggest you capture one of 15 years, so it's sort of within those terms that we've got. Information I need if you want to tidy it up now.
So say that again,
So
sorry.
if we just go through and tick off commencement date, we're happy with term 15 years, final expiry is fine, $1 per annum.
Did you already add if collected?
Yeah, collected is fine, yeah, if you want to. NA on no rent review, and then keep the rest of it.
Yes.
We probably don't need C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to go and move
Subject to those alterations and
A
amendments.
and B, subject to those changes.
Yep. I'm happy to move it.
I'll see that. Everyone happy?
Yeah.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Christine.
That's all right, I'll stay around.
Don't
Got
go
me
away.
another tricky one.
No, sorry.
Yeah, so I think some of my colleagues have got some good ones for you to take.
Okay, move on to the golf club lease.
Yeah, so same scenario again. I wasn't the deliberate of venue. So Richie and the rest of the team, yeah, I've met with them a couple of times as we've tried to work through this. Again, trying to implement this new policy, and you'll see that this time it wasn't a renewal, it was a rent review. So just to make certain as to when this policy is triggered, it's triggered whenever there is a rent review. We then try and get this policy in then, or when there's a whole new lease as well. So when I looked at this one, this lease was a bit different because we hadn't been charging the rent, but within their lease agreement, it was to be charged at 2.5 of gross revenue. And I went back and we found a resolution, as you'll see on page 25, giving a remuneration there for doing weed control measures. That you can see then when we had the new lease, that was actually put in, no mention of that 2004 resolution. I took that to, as you say, I took that to a lawyer and said, you know, where are we at? Does that supersede the lease? And he said, because of the date, it really needs to be taken back to the board to consider. So when you're considering this, you now have the policy to consider as well. So under the lease agreement, the rent review would be, and so if you're considering the 2004 resolution, that would be nil because of that. If you're considering just the terms of the new lease, it would be 1,716. If you're looking at the policy, it would be 772. So you can see that through the port.
Yeah.
That's sort of where I got to. And again, where I landed on was that we're trying to, the purpose of the report is that we're trying to, instead of having all of these sort of reads and being calculated, we're trying to get a really smooth and consistency there. We're looking at, and I put in there looking at the other leases, because I thought, oh, well, again, we'll look at what's around the region as well. So I did look around the region as well, and in the Alexandria Golf Club is currently under review. The Dunstan Golf Club has had the policy applied. Omakau Golf Club actually has a special clause within their lease. When I looked at it, that said that as long as their nature of their business doesn't change, then there will be no rent reviews during their term. And then you've got the Naisby Golf Club, and that is going to be coming up for review, and the policy will be applied then
So
in a few years.
What's the term of the Omakau, please?
I had it written down, sorry, it had a good 10 to 20 years to go. As you can see through the recommendations, I recommended that the rent review will be assessed in accordance with the policy, and that is 772 per annum. And also, sorry, the area as well, that no man's land, as we're calling it, is incorporated into their lease. And again, that additional one that if through the revision of the community licensing and licensing policy, it ends on a more favourable result to the golf club, then we trigger another rent review again. So again, another tricky one.
Yeah.
So if you've got any questions, I'll do my best.
The issue I see here, in my view, the golf club has been a caretaker, you could say, of a fairly large chunk of the recreation reserve in Rockstar. And I have to say that it's never looked better. There used to be a lot of broom when you come to town. You can see a lot of broom in the rough areas, right up to the War Memorial. And I've just recently been over on a site visit to the health camp, and I just couldn't be blown away by the rabbits over there and the work they've done with the rabbit fencing, with no help from us. They've made a very good job, and I struggle a bit with this one as well. Yeah, it's a.
So again, like the RSA, the golf clubs are not excluded from
Yeah, I know.
this policy, and we've already gone through a lot of work that actually Linda did here with the Dunstan, a lot of work with the Dunstan lease to bring them in. And same thing again, you know, they're all volunteers, they're taken care of. It looks fantastic, huge benefit to the community, etc. Yeah, don't envy your job today.
So I know in the past there was like you did refer to it, there was an offset. On one side there was a lease, on the other side we were paying for some spraying, paying for the chemical. So in a sense it was a middle position.
But with all the other golf courses around, they're all volunteers and they're all responsible for doing that. And this is that whole trying to get a consistency throughout the region.
The issue of this golf course is quite unique in the fact that it's very rabbit prone. There's a lot of hiding places on it, all the rocks and that, and it's not an easy place to maintain the rough. It's either steep or it's covered in rock. It needs regular spraying, and that's where that offset probably came in. That's really good, but it probably was before there was a major rabbit problem, and it is a serious rabbit.
And I think clearly we've got to consider Dunstan, Commonwealth, Alexandria, their player base, their revenue base from fees and so forth, vastly different.
So you've got to remember that the policy is 2.5 of subscriptions.
Exactly, but the strength is in the numbers. Like
Your strength of the volunteer presence in the numbers.
there's that, and there's also
the income is more.
So taking whether it be $1 or $1,000 out of a limited or contained revenue stream, like we've got here at the golf club here, I would suggest there's a far greater impact than it would do.
Then you've got issues on the flip side, and you've also with respect to the swimming pool as well. And they're going to be after that first 5 years, you know, you've got that rent review and it's going to be 2.5 again.
Which will be discussed at the time, probably.
That's swimming pools
We know
and
that.
bowling clubs.
Yeah.
And they don't have the maintenance like, it's such a large reserve area and it's an unknown cost.
Yeah. When to my mind, the precedent was already being set regardless of the policy, is that we've worked together as much as we can, but we've provided them funding for weed control we used to. And their volunteers have done all of that. Now, if the volunteers should lose interest, what's it going to do the cost to us?
Exactly, we cover them room in no time.
It
With a rush,
wouldn't
you
take,
just load the
it
vehicles,
wouldn't
but-
take one seat.
So, my thoughts on this one would be that to get back to the position we had before, I don't see why we couldn't pick it up in the community as a grant. You want to, the policy stays, although it is. And then that's an offset that we can do for the different process.
So my understanding with the grants, which isn't my area of expertise, but I often look at these two policies and think they're very sort of, you know, they do actually intertwine.
Yeah.
Is that you've now got the grants policy, which is 2 rounds every year.
Yeah.
So then that club would need to come to the board and ask for a grant that much, and then you need to allocate from your 2 rounds.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to debate the grants policy because, to be honest, that we're struggling with that as well. Because some of those grants that we gave in the past, they weren't tested, they were just grants that have been going on for a long time. Lots of grants being sprayed us out. So I don't really want to get into get some nets of those, but
But
I mean, there is
that balance,
Yeah.
isn't there?
Yeah.
Appreciate that too.
So if we agreed that the policy needed to be implemented, but we varied it for 0 lease cost, is that a potential option?
Well, again, within your options, you've got the option to make a decision to go against the policy. But I guess you have to encourage the board members to realise the reason why the policy was created. And that was because we had this, and our one adult club over here will be getting charged 1, another one will be over in the other region getting another, same with the toy library, same with all sorts of things. And this was a way of making sure it's fair and equitable throughout the district.
And I suppose that, because there is a general delegation, that we shouldn't act inconsistently with policy, but what I'm hearing around the table, this is quite unique because we have, unlike say the toy library, take toy library for example, that they pay their lease, but they're not then offsetting or doing volunteer work around the grounds and all that would otherwise be a council cost. So it is one of those situations again when we start applying the policy that isn't, you know, the toy library golf club that, yeah, I suppose isn't at all. But I do know, going to your point, Christina, Linda did a lot of work on this, applying the policy with the Dunstan Golf Club, and then if we're applying it in one part of the district one way, another part of the district the other way, that's really challenging. Would an option be, and Louise might want to jump in here, to direct officers to go away and to work out what the costs would otherwise to be council, noting there's a bigger land area than the Dunstan Golf Club, and to come back with that in terms of helping this decision and then line up the grants policy? I'm not saying that
Well, the other thing I was thinking about is we've got the review of the leasing and licensing policy coming up to council, and whether there is something in there that acknowledges volunteer work as well. Do you know what I mean? So if the difference between the Rockstar Golf Club to other leases is there's a significant contribution of volunteer work that otherwise cost council, whether there's a some way that can be considered in the leasing and licensing policy, so that it doesn't just look like every time something comes up, I'm diverting from the policy, because you've got something in there to consider.
We're just a bit unlucky. We've got 2 most contentious leases here today to look at.
Yeah, we have, and I totally understand where the golf club's coming from as well. I totally get it.
Yeah, it's just, I just think we need to look at it in a different way, because we
Yeah.
do need to have some consistency.
Say,
with these
yeah,
policies
yeah.
Across the district, but yeah, it's very hard.
So if they were to, get a grant, they'd have to do it annually, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and it's a competitive
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah, yeah.
There's another thing that happens that I'm going to suggest this one, but, and I'm waiting to see if Sharsaski's back, but the Cromwell Community Board have, I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not, so I think they have provision in their leases where they can remit, for capital works. So if a club is paying a lease, they can remit. No, I'm getting the nod.
That's why we.
No, that's not quite like that.
No.
That's not quite right.
Let's do that.
No.
We're not talking capital work.
The way it goes against
Yeah, that's
our
gonna
grants
be complexity that we don't need.
Yeah.
They don't have to involve, they do have some different structures on that. They do. But they, something that will accommodate these that are on the beginning land. Which is true.
So you're familiar with endowment land? So endowment land is land that's been gifted to the council for specific reasons.
Yeah.
And that endowment land then has to be, if it's part of the reason why they've gifted it to, with the endowment document to be, it needs to be market rent. So then these clubs are on the endowment land, they need to be charged market rent
Oh,
because of the endowment, and it's a way of dealing with that, but we're trying to tidy that up with the grants policy, and that we don't have that here, so.
The question I just asked of Linda, was the size of the golf club, which is comparable, with a lot smaller, to Clyde than other places where this policy has been applied. So it has been applied on other golf clubs in our district that also have large ground area.
You can't,
got more members.
you can't compare this golf course to Clyde. Right, you can't, but you can get a tractor over bloody all of Clyde.
Mm.
You know, it's easy to maintain in comparison.
I just say that, the Clyde site is here, and they have actually just, spent quite a considerable sum of money putting in imprints to refurbishing around the, boundaries. So they have invested their money themselves.
Right.
Well, the same thing's happening here.
Yeah, it's the same
That's
thing.
very convincing, I think, so.
The best idea I've heard so far is Stephen's idea of setting grants, but it's, and grants policy makes it a bit difficult to do.
Well, I think it's something that the community would, see funding round is open now, the only at the end of July, so now is a good time to have that discussion. So that's, or you'll be reviewing those financial and the next one will be in March. So that is up to the board if they want to use the community grant.
How did we go on the grant funding this round, this time caller? Will we over or undersubscribed on the community grants in this?
Generally, we are oversubscribed, so that's the way to.
Yeah.
That is a competitive.
But it's a new financial year, so if there's full budget for the year, we're glad.
To be Jim's advocate as well, though, that it's kind of going around in the circle as well, and you may create other community groups that are getting charged through this policy to then come to you through the grants policy.
You're going to the bands.
Yeah, same. Yeah, the other option would be to leave it on the table, just from home. I'm not sure that's a good outcome either.
No. I think the precedent's been set in history.
I tend to agree.
The policy
I,
doesn't
yeah.
fit.
I would so like to carry on with the way the policy has been. You can call it what you like, a remission for weed spraying or whatever.
Well, that's what I was going to raise before.
Yeah.
It's probably gonna spend more than that on weeds. But I guess that it's like accepting the policy the way it is, and then we do an offset. It's not what we want to hear.
Not what you want to hear.
Yeah.
It's my role is to implement
No.
the policy.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
So I'm sitting here as my role,
Okay.
but I have huge sympathy for all these community groups that you see throughout the district and the wonderful work they've done. But the work that you've done through the policy is to implement this policy, and that is my role.
Yeah, I understand
Just
that.
in addition to that, if the board was in mind to go against the recommendations that Christine's put forward that are consistent with the policy, which is a council policy, it would need to be by way of recommendation of the council. And that's under the delegations with that boards can't act inconsistently with council policy. It's the exact one, they could bring it up for us, and that would go up to council.
So would that also affect the resolution we've just passed for the RSA?
Yeah, because
Just
That was an
thinking
option.
that.
we've just done.
Yeah, because it was an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good point.
That is a real good point.
Sorry.
I wasn't thinking fast enough.
We can't change it.
If you think back to the way the grants, so if you think back to the way the grants worked before we had this, items like this capped.
Yeah.
And now we've reviewed the grants policy,
Yeah,
so that put an end to that. Now we're reviewing the,
This is not so, this is more or less in policy, I say, issue.
yeah,
yeah.
but it flows on to the way we used to do things.
But this one wasn't ever paid by a grant.
No, well,
It's that.
The old grant
yes,
policy.
So it wasn't really a part of that.
Yeah.
This is really purely a lease.
Yeah.
Question, a community leasing question
yeah,
or challenge.
challenge.
Because we've also got option 3 here, is to agree to rent review as determined by the board. Got that,
So what does that mean?
and you say goes.
I think that we can probably get to the stage where we can put it towards cover off with grants for the first year coming. And we think about what we want to do in the future and a long-term plan next year.
Yep.
But we've still got to deal with the grants policy.
Which is going back to council, and
It's
you've got a
going back to
member of the board here. Potentially.
Yeah.
Is anyone else?
So if we,
What you could do, actually, maybe Louise, something out here, could you resolve that you agree with Christine's recommendation of 2.5%, but in principle, subject to your decisions in the September round of the grants policy, that the first year will be paid from, will be a grant?
I don't think you could put that right really strong with them because if you get the grant.
This is crazy.
we'd rather have these policies, but
It is.
one size fits all, aren't they? That's the trouble.
What we're asking is, my position is that we don't charge them a lease fee. And we're constrained on doing that by policy, not by practicality, not by desire or need or anything else. It's just by policy.
Which has been challenged, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Right? So that's going against council policy.
But if it's not towards the leasing, the licensing policy, then yeah, it would be against the policy.
Yeah, so that's why I'm going down a different route, that we can agree with what's in front of us, but not the funding mechanism. So that will be a challenge for us.
Yeah, that's the tidiest way of working with policy. It's not that tidy either, is it? Because,
No, it still opens us. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. do we do there?
So it sounds like a suggestion about agreeing with the 2.5, but rather than saying it will be, can't really wording, but rather than saying it will be given a grant in principle, say that you direct the club to apply for a grant or advise, use the club to apply for a grant, and then you pick it up when there is a level of risk that around this table, when the contestable process is there, you might say, and I'm not suggesting you will, the rest of the club is you don't give it to them because you do something else better at your cost that you have to reward. But having in mind this conversation right here, you have the ability to do that through the grant. Other than saying you go to give the grant, because it's a conditional process, you recommend that the club and you pick it up then. Otherwise, the option I think is that you're going to go against the policy because the delegations don't enable you to make a decision and consistent with the council policy, and you have to make a recommendation that you go with the policy and council.
Because I always understood when we set out this new policy, that a group like the band, which we've given a grant, I never have to apply for it, it was just a certain amount, I can't remember exactly what it was. And then we were going to set it up that they would only apply formally every 3 years.
So that's under the grants policy.
Yeah.
This is under a separate policy, so that the band don't pay a lease. They, so they come under the grants. Yeah.
Grants.
Yeah.
If we agreed to give them out of their grants budget $772, we set that up to 3 years, or is that, and they apply every 3 years?
No. So if I might jump in there, with the grant policy, it's set around your eligibility period.
Yeah.
So we can't preempt commitment of money. But you could potentially inside that 3 year period, you have an opportunity for to say for these next 3 years, you could give it.
That's what I always understood when we set that policy.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, it makes sense to be in a 3 year period, long-term period.
We have recently revised the grants policy. So when it first went up as part of the LTP, it said multi-year grants should be given out in the first year of that LTP cycle. So I think we've taken that out, Paula, of the latest edition. Yeah, the LTP cycle.
So obviously that's the point because now you get to.
Yeah.
And the worst thing for us is that our grants are very limited, very small.
Yeah.
And so we don't have any other way of offsetting it by giving the golf course money for maintenance or spraying. That's the only way we can do it, is through the grants.
Yeah, that's a grant. And then the other process is through the long-term plan.
So in the policy review or in the policy itself, is there any discretion in the determination of the income?
So within the review though, the workshop review you did at the last community board meeting around it, there was that discussion around tightening up the wording around subscriptions and changing it to
I
income.
can't remember what we discussed, but
So
like
the board was aware that these two reports played too. Only other thing I could think of, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Royce, is could you lie this one on the table, keep it on the table and recommend a policy change to council?
I think that becomes really challenging given the work that Linda has done on the other golf clubs. And to say, go up to council and say, hey, we're changing it now, and then would have Clyde and everybody chasing Linda down the street.
But then,
yeah.
But I guess then you could within that recommend that they looked at that review again. I'm just trying to figure a way forward, but it's tricky.
You might make a random
Yeah,
observation.
yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, in instances where the golf club have a particularly large chunk of land to look after, and if they weren't occupying them and responsible for them, they would be something that we then would have to pay to maintain. Do we have the ability to budget going forward in this leases over reserves like this, that if there is a large rivet problem, for example, or some not weed problem, that we have the ability to offset costs that are incurred? Do we have the ability to have some form of policy on that? Because that would actually then create a difference between clubs that occupy large areas of land versus someone like the toy library who is just situated in a Skyline garage type facility and doesn't need hours and hours and hours of volunteer work to maintain the land, to pest control or remove noxious weeds.
It's almost like a pest control.
So, something to that effect, something that acknowledges the fact that some of these clubs have some quite serious
So that's
issues to deal with that are related to the quantity of land which they occupy, because that's actually a cleaner and fairer way of dealing with that.
So that grant's got to come from
So
somewhere.
yes, but not actually from the grants, but something that
So that
was
budget is dollar amount.
to do with reserve management.
We don't have budget.
But could we?
We
Is
could.
there a reason why we couldn't?
It has to, Gordon is exactly right, it has to come from somewhere and it will come from the ratepayers.
Yeah.
So you're playing a bit of a merry-go-round to go around it. Does it come out of the grants policy?
Yeah.
Does it, how does that
We
work?
rate more for it.
Because you have to rate more, and it either have to be through the open spaces contract, or it will have to be through a pest control contract, and I guess the risk of doing that is you then, there are wins and losses, because you take away all of that great volunteer work that goes in there, and you put a cost on the ratepayer. So, I wonder whether this is worth leaving it on the table for a further discussion, because there seems to be, the challenge seems to be a policy that seeks to deliver consistency, and the comment that one size doesn't fit all, and the unanticipated consequences, and whether there is a way to, through the actual policy, have some acknowledgement of the things that are being discussed around the table, and that is the level of volunteer work that goes into that, and the challenging, the bigger challenges, of course, is like Rockstar, with few members when you've got to do, significant cost of pest control and things. And a difficult site.
Yeah, so I just wonder.
So-
That can be addressed through the policy Saskia. I don't know whether we should let this sit for a meeting and have.
Well, even if we let it sit until we've got the outcome
Yes.
of the council's review
Policy.
and then come back and that the conversation around this is taken into consideration at council.
Yeah.
And obviously Stephen can be your voice within that discussion, you to say what we come across in this region. in this area.
Urgency on getting the lease decided today.
It's been ongoing conversation for a long time and I was waiting for the review, the conversation last time to happen. So I think all parties are wanting it resolved, but we're also wanting a really great outcome, potentially an improvement. There could be improvement of the policy actually. So maybe waiting a little bit longer will provide a better outcome for not only this ward, but for the policy, and perhaps that's the best solution.
That formula might be able to be tinkered with a little bit to get a better outcome.
That is up to the council.
Okay, so. Yep. We will have.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion?
Well, to me, it seems quite simple. If you're taking an extra $770 and it's being informed from these people, I don't even blame it because it's silly. But, you're taking it from them on one hand, and you talk about grants, why don't you just write the lease, and they pay their $770 and it gets paid straight back because they're maintaining an open space, a recreational reserve on behalf of the ratepayers. So it's quite simple. straightforward.
Yeah,
It's a man over here was worried about budgets and bits and pieces.
Yeah, no,
and the ratepayers, they're already gonna pay it.
Can't be done that way, woman.
Oh, it's not the way to do it.
No, no.
So
It's the logical way.
the conversation today, I've just talked to Linda, who's really crossed the current draft. We do think it probably is wise to get this line of the table, for us to go away and have a really good think around the unique circumstances. We think about the other golf clubs across the district. We think about the cost of pest control volunteers, and we have a look at that in the revision of the licensing policy. So we leave this to lie on the table until council has looked at the revised policy.
Yeah, I think that's.
So, by way of a resolution to leave it on the table, would you be happy with items left to lie on the table pending the finalisation of the leasing and licensing policy at the July 2022 council meeting? Does that sound right?
As you need specifics as to why you're doing that, so that you've got something to feed into the policy review, or you have to leave that open. And so it's around the volunteer labour.
It's volunteer labour.
The,
What is it?
and the cost.
It's just well, it's a unique golf course in my view to everything out, most of the others in Central, and it's got its own unique challenges, and I think,
I can say, I don't know if this would, this resolution would change in that particular case, because you're just going to bring it back when that other conversation has happened, I think. So it again is the item was left to lie on the table pending the finalisation of the leasing and licensing policy at the July 2022 council meeting.
Do we think we can, council papers do later this week?
it puts it all in Stephen's hands.
Do you think?
No, but
we want
it
to
doesn't
try?
actually bring us any opportunity to resolve it.
That's the trouble.
Yeah, we do that.
Well, I think,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm also thinking of the blackout of, because of elections.
Yeah.
I can't come back until November. But
But
again,
council still can conduct business through that time.
Yeah.
It doesn't shut everything down.
but what about coming back to the community board?
We need to think about that.
Yeah.
But again,
So
that's
that's
what-
definitely continue through that.
yeah, so we can just continue as status quo until we get that outcome.
I wonder if we just take July off their way, just
Yeah.
to make it, just in case we don't get.
Good.
I think there's a bit of thinking from today's both the
Yeah.
conversations that we've had here on papers today, that the team really need to go away and just have a fresh look at that policy. And just give them timeframes for us to sign out. I think they're all due with managers on Monday. We just need to regroup on it, so yeah.
Okay. So maybe we could change it to let's it lie on the table pending the finalisation of the leasing and licensing policy at council.
Yeah. perfect.
Review, do you need review after that policy move?
Yeah, yeah.
Review at council, and then any talking that has to be done can be done, I suppose. Yeah. Okay.
And
So-
we will try and get it to the July meeting. We'll do that.
So we'll
I'll move.
move it, and Stephen, you're secretary. Okay.
More work to do.
Thank you.
Okay. Nikki, talks about your camping proposal.
Yes. So I guess the main thing to reiterate here, which we've been talking a lot about today, which is that camping on the Rockstar Recreation Reserve does go against council's existing policies, which don't permit regular camping on this site. So if you wanted to permit camping on this site, we would need to amend the reserve management plan, and that would trigger a consultation process with the community. Ultimately, that decision is up to you.
So happy for any stores anywhere in the valley.
any sites that aren't in the reserve management plan already, because that plan has been consulted on with the community.
So the only site we've got is
Yeah.
which you could add now is, you should be able to subscribe.
Yeah.
And has its own issues.
But how's the race course operate? Is it hot?
What about project?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, so it's specifically for council then.
Yeah.
Can I say something? The word camping is incorrect as far as what I've got proposed. They're staying overnight. They're not going into lunch, tents and camp. There's a big difference between the word camping, freedom campers and motorhomes. Huge difference. I don't think the council will realise that.
The policy, yes.
The policy doesn't know. And
So as I've said in my report,
Yeah.
the camping regulations don't talk about park over property sites because they came after the camping regulations were developed. So we're sort of retrofitting this into an existing, camping act. But from our perspective, it's still, motorhomes staying overnight on the site. So the reserve management plan does say from time to time that could happen. So that might be one-off. You might say, yes, there's this event happening. We're happy for that to happen for that time. But as an ongoing activity, you would want to make sure that the community are supportive of having regular campers at that site. It's quite a public space as well. Everybody can see it.
what's everyone's view on this? We're sort of hamstrung again by,
I think to remember about the reserve management plan, it was publicly consulted on.
Yeah.
2014, those policies must have come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Generally public, or they were supported by.
So was the spatial plan that we're process that we're going through address any of this? In any respect?
Probably not.
So,
I think you need to decide what you want, and if it is that you want to do this, you need to set about reviewing the various reserve management plan, and there is also the campground regulations that Nikki's referred to as well, which actually say that if there's any donation or then you have to comply with regulation, which is another whole layer to do with, and they wouldn't have anticipated at the time motorhomes, but that's abolitions and initiating an exemption to that, campsites, all those sorts of things as well. So there's layers, and then there's because it's on the reserve, it's the reserve management plan, and other places that can happen because of the zoning of the land, but this is reserved. So the example Crew gave in Ranford, I think that land's actually zoned business, so they can do that as a private.
And they've bought that land, so it's not a reserve.
Yeah, which is, but they still have to comply with the district plan, and the zoning is appropriate, so that.
That's part of it.
so is it the frequency that you're talking about before that might trigger it as far as the policy goes?
No, I was just clarifying that in the reserve management plan, it says on the Rockstar Recreation Reserve that from time to time, council may approve camping at designated sites. So that would be like a one-off situation where you might have a big event happening and you might say, right, you, for that weekend, like cavalcade or something, you know?
Yes.
But if you want to have a regular pop site, then that would mean we would need to go and say to the community, are you happy to have a pop site here, or do you want one? We would frame a question to do kind of like a mini consultation as a review to this plan.
And just following up on your comment on, sorry to butt in, but maybe through the spatial plan, we could say, where does the community want camping?
Yeah, I mean,
It's a little bit outside the norm that you normally address, and it's not.
That's the only time we can address it.
Well, no, it's not. You can address it through your reserve management page. That's probably your best place. Somewhere in the end, it's probably a discussion about where do you want camping. And open spaces, because that's coming up, this year, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
space strategy will identify that, but it'll identify the management plan for Teviot Valley, they're all identified
Yeah.
sites as well, so this will probably reflect that to the higher. And there's about a couple of private camp sites already designated for Teviot Valley.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, like if we've got one site that says, Finn's Pond, well, it's being oversubscribed for a variety of reasons.
Site.
Huh?
Popular site.
A popular site, but also the industry that we operate here is seasonal. And in the summer, it's well overpopulated.
So this here is talking about one site, right? This is talking about one site.
Yeah.
So we really haven't talked around the table whether we accept that that is a good site. And my argument straight up would be that isn't.
Yeah, and you're probably quite correct there.
Probably have areas nearby that would be, but.
There's areas like behind the rugby pavilion, something on top of the hill there, could be tidied up and could be a site, but it still has to go through the same process with reserves management.
So are you saying then that the actual proximity that's being proposed in the car park is being the ability to put a pot there, or are you saying that the whole golf course area is not appropriate?
No, I'm just saying, I don't believe the car park here.
Right.
Is it right?
Yeah.
I tend to agree with that, so.
Yeah.
I can see the benefit in having access to camping there for the golf club though.
I can totally see the argument.
Better sites.
And I think the sites nearby, when I suggested up on the hill behind the rugby pavilion is probably a good site. But we can't agree to that either because it needs to go through a reserve management plan. And that, when's that come to a renewal order?
It's 2014, maybe a couple of years.
But we can we just do a consultation for this?
Do for camping.
Yeah.
I wonder if we should be doing our open space strategy first,
Yeah,
then looking at the other things.
yeah, that would make more sense.
Because that's the higher document and these things for that, right?
And that's coming up this year.
So, I mean, to me, I see there is a solution. That we talk to the golf club about alternative locations on the reserve for parking for a certain number of vehicles on certain occasions.
So with
Would that get us through the?
On certain occasions.
Well, it's just like I was asking Nicky before about the frequency.
Yeah, I guess that's, what's that?
It just says, from time to time, council may approve camping within the recreation reserve at designated sites. That's in regards to overnight.
Generally accepted that it allows for things like cavalcades or a golf tournament or not every night.
Yeah. So
if, for example, when I know that the golf club got a fairly big centenary happening later in August, the 100th tournament, if they have people coming that needed to camp, could they come to it?
I see that would be consistent.
they had a weekend where a couple of years ago where all the campers came to the golf club for a weekend conference or whatever it was. I'm not too sure, but anyway, that would probably be triggered there. Where it would be okay if they got permission. But just ongoing camping.
Stays camping. Night
or overnight stays.
But also do NZMCA, do they set up parkover properties on land that's not theirs. So would they actually set up one on council reserve? Is that something that they would want to do?
Yeah, actually, at the moment, the NZFCA are looking for land in Rockstar to set up an NZFCA park, same as we've done in Redfern. And the ground up on top behind the rugby club was suggested to me, and Harry and I were going to come and see you about it, we hadn't had a chance to, but that was one suggestion. When they go up there, they buy the land.
That's not possible.
They couldn't buy that land up there, could they lease it? NZFCA. They prefer to
Probably
own
do a
it.
lease. They probably couldn't.
Couldn't buy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't buy.
Unfortunately, NZFCA prefer to own the land, they leave the land around Roxburgh. Yeah. Because we would like to see a motorhome park here in Roxburgh.
Yeah, so, well, thresh that around there. There's options, but not immediate options.
Well, I think there's an immediate option, but it's the discretion of council as to whether they determine from time to time that the golf club have those.
Make it worse.
So what you could maybe put a resolution in is there is direct staff to have conversations with the golf club around a schedule of events that would be consistent with the management team.
So that's already,
That's
already happened. I don't think we need a resolution.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Okay.
And in terms of the MTA side of it, that would need to go through the whole process of.
So regular overnight camping, essentially every day of the week, we need to change the policy.
How do you think it works at other golf clubs throughout New Zealand that do these parkover nights?
So I don't know, some of them clearly might be owned by the golf club themselves, so they make their own rules.
Right.
And some may be these from council and they may have some, might not have these restrictions that will be in our plan.
Right, okay.
Keeping in mind that this was, the community were happy with these recommendations, and this plan was put across the line.
Things change.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Things do.
Okay. So to deal with what we're going to deal with here. Move that we received a report particularly of significance and find a request from the golf club to allow regular paid camping on the car park used by the club. That's what we're going to decide. Now there's options to look at the golf club to look at one-off events. And there's the options when we do our open spaces plan review. And that's in the next year or so. So that's where we'll be.
It's 12 months, yes.
Yeah, it's 12 months. I think someone moved that. We've received the report and declined the request.
Just decline that in the car park is currently with you.
Yeah.
I'll move that.
Second us. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
So we continue.
Can we move on now to the banners of the main street?
Right.
Banners of the main street.
Oh, that's lovely.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. This report was put before the board as a request to sort of look into options for the banners down the main street of Oxford. So the banners have been there for a number of years, and they initially were. And in 2019, the board funded the swap out of the conventional stick banner brackets to the flag track one, so that we can do them off the street, which would make quite a difference, because it was a bit treacherous the way they were back in the day, especially for Rockstar when you haven't got a doubtful contract that people may do, but it wasn't ideal. So we have this opportunity here, and that they are sitting empty and idle. I guess there's two challenges here for the board. One is that there isn't a budget in the community board's maintenance budgets to replace these banners on a regular basis. There is, and it's $1,500 sort of over every sort of 2 to 3 years, but these banners wear out fast. And so it's something also the board needs to consider if the community are going to be making these and funding these, is that the lifespan of these are short. So it can be quite a disincentive to have to replace these on a regular basis. Be that as it may, I've just listed some options for the board to consider. So I guess as a backstop and as something that the district has an opportunity to use, the regional identity, Sanctuary regional identity has some standard district-wide banners that the board could install there. That's obviously around budget availability, but they're there if the board needed them to fill up the spaces. The community-led design that was suggested by the member of the public that spoke to the board is definitely an option as well, and certainly the community wanted to go ahead and do that. It's been done in the study before. It would involve funding. There are some options for the community if they wanted to fund that independently, or to look to the community board to apply for a grant. And the other thing that has changed a little bit from back in the day when, and even when the presentation was put to the board about individual design. So when the regional identity were developing their banners, they used that block design rather than a photographic design, because they last longer. The block design was 2 or 3 colours, and they generally were a bit more durable than the digitally produced ones. Talking to the flag manufacturer that we use, that digital design process has improved so that they're lasting a bit longer, and that gives you more flexibility in your design and your individuality, which was the proposal put forward by the member of the public. So that's a new opportunity that hasn't really been explored much. Equally, we haven't tested it as a board, so we don't know what the longevity of those flags are either, but it's definitely an option. The member of the public also mentioned about making them individually, putting them up one at a time, and the costs. Well, like a batch, I've put some costs in those reports that came from the flag maker. So those costs were based on 11 flags, and if you go down to those individual numbers, the price does jump. It doesn't mean to say you couldn't get 11 banners made that have individual designs, but I would recommend you did from one for cost. And the other thing too is you've got a very long main street, and so if you use 1 or 2, you might lose the impact. But that is up to availability. You have the flexibility that you could put up. Another option to the board is to encourage individual flags if you want to show your activities that are around your region, and use eyesight as an example. Could be outside the front of this building. And one thing I would just say as a word of caution is if you wanted to look at, if the commercial entities wanted to put banners up, that is an advertising opportunity, so it might just change the rules a wee bit, or change the way you want to approach them. It could be a revenue making opportunity, but it's going to be treated as a different process. So I'm here to give you the information that I gathered, and just to help you if you wanted to discuss or find a direction forward.
So, what sources of funding have we got access to?
From a board perspective, would be a community grant. So there's $5,000.
Promotional grants and
there are also promotional grants, and there's
district budget.
$5,000. Yeah, and that in the board budget.
For promotion.
So that would be something like Teviot prospects going to.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
That's what I'm sort of thinking, is that if we can give them an avenue of getting the. The other thought I had too was that in terms of all the advertising, like the movie theatre here is celebrating 125 years of being in business and showing movies this year. And I'm sure that organisation may contribute to putting some banners up and things like that. So it sort of probably is a prospects type activity as opposed to something that sits there.
Well, the cinema could apply for a community grant to support its own fundraising.
Exactly.
And they,
Yeah.
and given that the lifespan of that banner will be less than a year,
Yeah.
potentially,
It's just having someone facilitate.
Yeah, that's right.
Were you thinking, Norman, in terms of the 100, were you thinking of doing all 11 banners the same?
It could well be, you know, it's just,
Like, what were you thinking?
I mean, I just saw like 10 or 11 banners with 125 years
Yeah,
of
no.
show movies and
Right, right.
so anyone that drove through.
That's kind of cool, because that's something.
And it's the same for the pool
Yeah,
opening.
yeah.
You could do it for the pool opening.
Mm.
You could do it for the golf club.
Mm.
100th anniversary of the annual tournament.
So when you, the prices for these ones, the digitally printed ones.
Sounds like the way to go, doesn't it?
Now, so you have to do them all the same, because like, in that order, can you do, say, half a dozen different designs?
To the flag maker, it sounded like if you did a batch, you could have individual photos and they can and the batch, so you could individualise them a bit. Yes. That's what they said. I think we would have to do some more digging, but it certainly seems a viable.
So you could get 2 or 3 groups do
Exactly.
4 or so each.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like when the cavalcade was getting set up to come to Monastrate, they could use those as a.
The other thing is, I'm just thinking off the top of my head as well, is this idea that came from the member of the public with fruit. Fruit's quite seasonal, so that could almost, instead of putting up Christmas banners, our Christmas banners could be fruit, because it's the fruits, well, I mean, arguably it's stone fruit season, it's not apples and pears, but it's, you know, cherries and apricots and, you know, it's that Christmas summer time.
Yeah.
And you could have them up for 3 or 4 months, and then you could have another group put some banners up. I don't know.
Okay, so from here to get Teviot prospects to pick the ball up and run with it, how do we do that?
I should mention it at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
And we already talked about it at the last meeting. We talked about it at the last meeting. I brought it up, didn't I? Paula was there, and I brought up the fact that we were looking, because we were talking about, we're going through the community action plan at the last meeting, and that came up as an item. And then I said, well, actually, we've been discussing it. So I already briefed them on it. So I think, yeah, we should go back to Teviot prospects and see if they want to pick it up, and probably talk to Anne, isn't it? Yeah. And
I don't know her last name.
Do you know her last name?
Oh, I spoke to her yesterday.
yeah, okay. Oh, well, if anyone can remember.
And I can attend that meeting with you, and we can talk about it together.
That would be great.
Yes, we'll do that together. And the other thing that the board has to give leadership and guidance to the community group is your Teviot Valley book that does talk about this as being the food basket of Central. So there's some really good guidance that Freeze is about that.
Yeah.
It's about
Yeah.
this is the food basket for this weekend. So there's lots to work.
I think there's I think there could be some really great ideas. Yeah, if we just kind of did a bit of a brainstorm to really make it feel like that when you come down the main street with those banners. Yeah.
So I guess things that the board might want to consider is if there are multiple batches of banners, who's going to be putting them up and putting them down, and just that standard, who decides what's up to scratch and what's not. So it could be up to the community, it could be up to you, but you certainly want to.
The team leader and Teviot prospects will do that.
Well, they could come to the board, I suppose.
I reckon it should get
for a
signed off
year,
the
or what
board,
they're
because
gonna
then
put
we
out.
could get some, make sure that we've got continuity, rather than just giving them the project without looking.
Probably the council.
But I can't, yeah.
But it's your board because it's your area.
But I think James has designed that one, that Teviot, that he's done that prototype.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good standard. So I think that's a great prototype. Yeah, and I think as long as they were all designed through James and or one person, and so it wasn't just a mishmash of a whole lot of different designers, then we would get some continuity.
So I think the other thing is D is good for us because there's not enough money set aside for replacing
Yeah.
the own banners. So
What was that, Stephen?
D, you know, D on here, I think that's important. I just don't think we've ever put aside enough money for this project.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it does set Teviot Valley Community Board in a different space to the rest of the other boards because they are funded by the.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I
We're
agree.
struggling to find
Yeah.
money. It shouldn't be budgeted.
Yeah, because it's a big promotion for the town, and the towns always look great when you drive in and they've got good looking flags.
The other opportunity you have with the flag track system is if it is windy season or winter season, you can take them down now and it'll help rest the flags and make them last a bit longer.
True.
Well, that's the sort of thing sponsors will do.
And Teviot Prospect might own some of that too, and it's a community and might take some of that.
We'll give them something to do.
Yeah. That's what they should be doing.
Who said that?
Recommendation. Do you want to say in here, Paula, around the Teviot prospects to be encouraged to apply for grants at the moment? We sort of left the funding thing hanging.
Yeah.
So that's where we ended, wasn't it? That we're going to go away, work with Teviot prospects, encourage them to do up the designs, and that if you decide to proceed with it and it's a successful grant application, that's where the money would come from. Is that, have I got that right? I'm just wondering in your recommendations if you need to reflect that, because at the moment it goes, considers funding and design options.
Yes, because it wasn't for me to say
Yeah.
Teviot Prospect should do that.
Yeah. So encourage.
So we could speak with
Yeah.
Teviot Prospects to see
Yeah.
if they'd be interested in supporting the community to develop.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of an actual recommendation, would that be direct staff to have conversations with community groups and discuss the grant funding options?
Logically, it's to be a prospect.
Yeah. Okay, so say Teviot prospects in it. Okay.
Are you considering, you're considering that for replacing B?
Yeah, modification of.
Your modification of recommendation B is what I'm suggesting, because what I've heard around the table is that D you'd like to keep in and as part of the next long-term or annual plan, the long-term plan.
Yeah.
Is to have a proper discussion around this, but in the interim, talk to Teviot prospects around proceeding with the project and potentially applying for grant funding out of the community grant.
This one's a little bit confusing because we're talking about two different types of banners. We're talking about banners that the community might want to pull together and put up. But there's also our own banners that we don't fund enough for and haven't funded enough for in the past. So you're talking about two different funding streams here, two different styles of banners. But you're talking about our own real difference banners.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, well, some fruit maybe and some 125 years of movies.
Would it help then, Stephen, with recommendation D, if we went investigates and precedents annual funding allocation for council, council-led street banner replacements?
Can I just say, I actually see that they're not two different things. If the community are designing the banner and they have a banner design they want to, the board could still fund that if you wanted to. So if you've got a budget in place, you have an option of taking a community design banner production or entity banner. That option D is about having a budget in place so that the board has the opportunity to fund banners in the future.
That's what needs to happen. Yeah. So that's D. So we've got.
So I guess option B is just a stopgap to keep you through.
So I've got direct staff to talk with community groups to discuss community grant options.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll leave C there. And we've got D. So the only change is really to B. Move all in at once.
Yes. Yep.
Someone like to move
I'll do that.
A, B, C, and D. That's Sally. Second it.
Yeah. Seems silence on the bench.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Shouldn't be the same.
Carried. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you.
Right.
I'm 67 bucks a run.
Financial report.
Oh no. This hour of the day.
Afternoon.
This is a very nice briefing walk.
Hello.
So this is the financial report for the period ending 31st of March. I'll take the report as read.
Yeah.
Not much has changed since last quarter. Still favourable. The additional income is through the reserve contributions, which are hard to budget for in the timing of those. And capital expenditure, the biggest one there is the Rockstar pool, the grant to be taken down.
Yeah.
Other than that, are there any
Has
other?
anyone got any questions? Yeah. So it looks pretty straightforward, self-explanatory, isn't it? Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
So I'd like to move that the report was received.
On with that.
Stephen, I'll second. All those in favour?
Right.
Aye.
Against?
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Short and sweet.
Easiest report today.
Yeah.
Right. Mayor's not here, so we haven't got a mayor's report. Chair's report. I've had a few meetings regarding the New Zealand Bachelor Project, so I'll do a separate report at the end on where we're sitting at the moment with that. So I'll just run through the community board meetings I've had. Basically, we've had 2 meetings, service trust meetings in May, 5th of May and 14th of June. There's been several meetings in between. At the moment, we're sitting with two doctors at the moment sharing, job sharing. So it's going along pretty good at this stage. We did have a resignation of manager, and Marion Hamilton is manager at the moment, manager, and is doing a really good job. So where the Community Service Trust is looking at options for Teviot Valley for primary care. So, it's a countrywide issue at the moment. We need to pick up the newspaper, shoot to GPs and everything. 16th of May, Valley Rest Home meeting. A swimming pool meeting on the 1st of June. Sally will comment on that. We had a combined community board Tibet prospects meeting, and that was on the 2nd of June. We just discussed options for further community consultation for a preliminary social impact assessment for the Lake Onslow project. So where we've got with that is the initial social impact assessment. The company doing that, Cayman's, only talked to Pat Garden in the south and Nick Land Council. We thought perhaps that's not enough for even for a preliminary social impact assessment, so they're coming back to talk to Tibet prospects, community board, business group, and there will be time for it anyway. individual discussions with Nick Taylor, anyone who wanted to. So that is on, he's coming down the 11th, so he'll be here for the 12th and 13th, so the board will probably be on the 13th. So I'm in Wellington on the 12th, so we'll be back for that. Happy with that. I had a phone call that day from Neville Hills from Forest Management Limited, and he's been engaged by Tahu to look at all the tree stock they've got at the health camp, and they're going to be having a big tidy up of old trees and dangerous trees and trees in the wrong place. And he was basically wanting to know if it was possible to get access up the gully from Teviot Street in the diggers, and they were going to push the old tree, there's an old tree on the boundary that they may need to have access from council side. But before that happens, he will be in touch, so we'll talk about it more with you. I have a talk with some later body, so Tahu are pretty keen to work with the board on anything they're doing, or the community as such, really. And there's going to be quite a large amount of firewood there, because they are going to have all split and be available for less well off in the community, as their words. And I thought, well, the RSA or the Lions Club may be interested in distributing that wood. So we'll keep in contact with them there. They are going to mulch all the debris they got left, the slash, and I think they're talking about doing some native nursery planting down there, and they could work out with the board if we want to outsource something at some stage. They're trying to just work with the board, good citizens, if you like, and work with the community. So that was quite an interesting look around down there, what they're going to do. There's quite a bit of work to do there. And there's a lot of rabbits along with it. And they are going to rabbit pits and boundaries. So there's been no mention of who pays for that. And Samson will go down and do it, but we'll just wait and see what comes out of that. I did receive a petition from the elderly persons flats. It's a very small petition, but it was a petition. Chainsaw started cutting trees at the swimming pool. We cut the trees down at the swimming pool there and tidied it all up. It was worked out pretty well with local contractors. And probably before the second tree hit the ground, we had someone from the elderly persons housing there want to know how far we're going. They are wanting some Lombardy poplars and some big willows. There's not many of them, but there's some big trees there right near the flats that showed them. And they were, they thought the council was paying for the pool work and they wanted to carry on along. Throw down and had a bit of a look, because it was probably 9 or 10 poplars, 3 or 4 big willows, pretty close. It's probably something that needs to be done. Needs funding is the issue, and it needs to probably go on a plan or something in the future.
So whose land are they on?
Well, they'll probably ours. Yeah. Teviot Street goes along there.
Oh, okay. So it's all that way.
It's similar cost to what the full one would cost, so a grand plus one.
Yes.
Those trees, you're right, putting something fixed and then those. Because that you have to hold other tree budget. just talking those out, and they're not a hazard at the moment.
No, they're not a hazard at the moment, but we all know what one by the poplars we got. Some of the big ones we did take down at swimming pool were starting to rot on the inside.
How many did we take down, do you know?
How many we took?
Yeah.
No idea, it's very long. And we stuck painted them, so.
Yeah.
You can't kill any, like we're allowed to take them out long, we didn't kill any wallows along the riverbank. You could trim them. You're not allowed to kill them. So we had the permission from Lynn's and RRC to do what we did.
We did.
And it was pretty good outcome.
It was as long as, none of the trees actually sat in the water, in the river, so anything in the river is ORC, anything out is Lynn's, and so everything we chop down is out.
So how do we make sure that that comes into the process to get the budget to do it?
Yeah, it needs to go on the next step. Well, if we agree that that needs to happen.
Must increase is how we go about that.
That would be something we
Or
put it in, yeah.
Okay.
consideration.
Consideration, yeah. Because at this time of the year, that's really shady. And probably the heating costs of them, because the shade all the time, this time of year, the flash and more expensive. And they're always sort of been renowned to be the poor cousins, those flats are the ones at this end because they're in the shade then. It's not something we have to look at. Yeah. Sarsfields has had a copy of it.
Yes, which it's good on to really.
Already, okay. Okay, and so here we are. Project. It's our last meeting. It's one meeting in Wellington, another one 12th of July. We've also had several Zoom meetings. And I've had a couple with them, with MB looking at student assessment and the need for a little more work done. And happy to do that. Sort of happens in July, which we just talked about, so that's all good. You will have noticed that there has been some advertising in local papers. The bulletin for today. Some work that's been, they're sort of moving off the tops with their drill rigs and into the valley to do some work over the winter. And they're looking basically at potentially some reservoir, different sites, but it could be a reservoir built on the side of the river to pump from out to the lake. So it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that we're going to go to the dam, so we're looking at other options. So I've done a bit of work with GHD, had meetings with them and looked at where they want to do some drilling, and it's all on council road sites really, and not on private land at this stage down in Teviot. So you see two roads on the side of the roads and you know what's happening there. And I've also had a meeting, Zoom meeting with the VMB, TRG, getting workers with looked at a lot of the work that's been done on green peakers and hydrogen, biomass, with all those options. But, they'll be bolt-ons to any project we do. This is mainly down here. So, yeah, it's looking like we have to one day. Whether it's near future or not, I've got to say. So that's where we sit. So we will be having our meeting. Everyone's happy. Confirm the time if you have one on 13th of July. From Nick Taylor. Cool. That's what we've done. Some like the chair's report we received.
I'll do that.
So, second it.
Thanks, William.
There you go. Sally.
Cool. So on the 19th of May, I had a meeting at the courthouse with Saskia, and we were talking about the board's relationship with Teviot Prospects. We were meant to meet Pat Garden and have a meeting with him, but it clashed with the that potential Zoom meeting that we had. So we didn't end up meeting actually, did we, Saskia? So that's something that we need to still follow up with. 23rd of May, Teviot Prospects meeting, and at that meeting they discussed the Becker social impact study, the open space strategy, and the fact that community grants were opening. And as I mentioned before, I told them about the street flag idea. 24th of May, I had a full fundraising committee meeting. On the 31st of May, I had a Teviot Valley Community Hubs meeting where we interviewed one of the candidates for that role. On the 1st of June, I had a walkways meeting, and I also had a swimming pool meeting on the 1st of June. And so just to give you an update where we're at with the swimming pool, we're at the moment running a boosted sport campaign in the community, and we're aiming to get to $22,000, and it's an all or nothing campaign. So if we don't get $22,000, we get none. And currently we're sitting on about 70 something % of our funding. So we're doing really, really well. When's the closing date? Yeah. Is the 6th of July. Yeah, so we have got, I'll just bring it up actually, right, it's right here. So we're at 71%, $15,640, and we've got 19 days left to run for the campaign. So we've been getting some really good donations, actually. It's fantastic. And the lady that is helping us run the campaign, she can't believe what a great job we're doing in such a small community. So yeah, we haven't got far to go, but we need to get the whole amount of money or we get nothing. And we're actually hoping to raise more than 22,000 because we're trying to raise money for the pool covers, which come at a cost of about 64,000. So 22 is going to scratch the surface. So see how we go there. And tomorrow, Raymond and myself are going to go and meet with 2 of the green staff and our contractor from Christchurch, who's overseeing the project for us, our project manager, Dave. He's going to come in on Zoom, and we're just finalising, because we haven't signed the contract, so we're finalising, discussing that tomorrow. So more of an update after I've had that meeting with them. Oh, and I should just give a plug too. We've got a fundraising dinner on the 1st of July at the golf course, and tickets are selling really fast. We've sold, I think, 2/3 of the tickets. So if anyone does want to come to our fundraising dinner, that is Friday, the 1st of July, and Bernard Kirkpatrick is catering the meal. So that in itself is worth coming for. So hopefully we'll see some of you at that. 2nd of June, I went to the Lake Onslow meeting with Teviot Prospects. 3rd of June, I had another MPI grant meeting, and we confirmed that McElray Consulting have got the contract. And then on the 10th of June, I had another MPI grant meeting with Bill K. Blake, because we realised that we can get some extra support from MPI for that grant. So he's going to come in right at the beginning. We're having a meeting with McElray Consulting, and we'll also have Bill there. So that's kicking off in about, I think about a couple of weeks' time. We're having that meeting. So we're finally making some progress here. It's taken quite a long time to get that off the ground and to find someone to fill that role. So finally we're going to make some traction. But she's got a team, and I think was part of the benefit of going with them, is that we might just get a bit of traction a bit faster once we get going. So, and she definitely had the skills to fill everything that we needed. And that is me.
Already, I've missed a couple listening to Sally, but I'm sure I've got plenty on my list. So on the 10th of the 5th, the Rockstar Medical Services Trust, and that's multiple meetings over the last 6 weeks, which Raymond has talked about. So it's an ongoing process at the moment. On the 11th, I went to Cromwell to hear a report on aquatic weed control in Lake Dunstan. And to be fair, I've been attending those meetings for years and years, but I managed to highlight to them that it's not just an issue in Lake Dunstan, it's an issue in Lake Rockstar as well, where the cyclists get off at this end at Shingle Creek, struggling to get in because of the weeds in there. So it seemed like they were surprised, but I don't believe they didn't know about it. Anyway, 24th, Careers Progression Manager, and that's like a subcommittee of the Central Otago Labour Market Governance Group, which is something I chair within council. And then I had another meeting on the same group on the 31st. I attended and spoke at Cliff Parker's funeral, and that was on the 25th of the 5th, 30th of the 5th hearings panel, which was a Zoom meeting on that occasion. First of 6th was a council meeting about community grants, bridge strategy proposal, earthquake prone buildings, which is, it does have an impact here in Roxburgh. I've talked to one of the landowners about that, so they will be getting notified where potentially the buildings could fall down, because there's a main thoroughfare through Roxburgh, so they've been highlighted already. Teviot Valley Spatial Plan, give an update on that today? I'm not sure. Yeah, I think we did, yeah. And we adopted the Otago Civil Defence Emergency Management Strategy on that day. 3rd of the 6th, Audit and Risk. 8th of the 6th, Central Otago Labour Market Governance Group. So that was a discussion on the RSE cap. So at the moment, there's a possibility we can get the cap increased and get some more RSE workers into Central Otago. I said possibility because it's always contentious and a little bit political in the past, and I don't think that Central Otago's got the correct allocation, because there's some big players in that space around New Zealand, and I think that in the past we've probably been not treated that well. It's a job for us to make sure that we get a bit more vocal. And then a possible web-based approach for attracting labour and staff to Central Otago this coming season, and that's looking at what they've done on the likes of Nelson. We've got Pick Nelson and another one that's running in Southland. And if you go onto those websites, they're doing a good job to get good results. And so that's being priced up at the moment to see what that would cost. On the 8th, I had a catch up with Nick Lanham, and that was on fruit loss marketing opportunities. So he's done a lot of work on that, and I think going forward they'll be looking for some funders to set up some commercial operations in Central Otago to process the waste fruit. And on the 14th of the 6th, the hearings panel meeting was in Alexandria. Is that this one? Yeah. Okay.
Stephen, sorry, where's the money coming from for setting up the website for the fruit business?
So the Labour Market Governance Group had a little bit of funding left over from when they did the survey last year.
Right.
And that'll kick it off. We're coming back with some figures because it won't be enough.
Because we should be talking to my group.
With 7,500 left over. Jackie gave an update.
Oh, she did. Okay, so she knows about it. Okay.
In fact, the only update she gave was that they've employed someone. This is, didn't say who or anything else.
Right. Okay.
So there is a